Hi, this is Linda Thompson, your host for The Author Show. Today's featured book, Stalemate, is about the age-old drama that brings direct opposites together into a heated yet meaningful relationship. The relationship between Tom, a single father, and Cassie, who is a bit disillusioned about men and romance, seemed doomed from the start. Can this relationship survive? And if so, how? Author Ginger Sharp joins us today to talk about Tom and Cassie's story in Stalemate. Ginger, welcome to the Author Show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, Ginger. Will you please give us a quick overview of Stalemate?
Yes, well, Tony Verducci, the main character in the book, he's got a lot of dark secrets, and he comes from a very protective northern New Jersey Italian family, so his mom's a little too protective, so he's a single dad, so he takes his daughter and finds himself a garden apartment and tries to live life and make it day by day. And then we have Cassie, who is a California girl from Carpinteria, and basically she's a daughter of a dairy farmer who goes to veterinary school, and she moves to New Jersey and to follow this other boy that she met in veterinary school. And there's kind of conflict, kind of pulling, tugging going on, and she realizes that she's made a lot of mistakes, and maybe she made a mistake moving to New Jersey.
You classify your books as steamy adult romance novels. Do you write them with a particular age group or a type of reader in mind?
My process is I eat Chinese food, and then I have a dream. And when I wake up in the morning, sometimes the dreams are book-worthy, sometimes they're not. So the audience that I normally write towards are basically my friends. And then it just stems from there. And the way I always used to describe my readers as housewives, middle-aged, but I'm finding now, and I know it's wrong, but I'm finding now that I have high schoolers reading my book. I kind of learned that at one of the book shows, and they're like, oh, I read your book. I'm like, oh, I meant that to be for 18 and over. But there's a lot of adult situations in there and a lot of adult moments, and I was kind of shocked. And kids are like wildfires. If they like something, they tell everybody. So it's working out in my advantage. I have people who love the alpha male characters, but they also like to see them broken down and built back up again. And I guess I'm more of a coming-of-age writer. Like, people realize, oh, well, the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the hill. And that's really, I think people enjoy life situations, like contemporary life situations. So I think that's really more like my genre, that people want to read something current and up-to-date, but also timeless.
If you were writing an article about Stalemate, what would the headline be?
Steamy New Jersey boy gets a lesson of a lifetime.
Interesting. So how would you describe your writing style, Ginger?
Well, I originally used to use too big of words, I was told. I was told to dumb it down, and I mean, this is really pathetic to the readers, but to bring it down to an 8th grade reading level. I was told during my first book that the word tethered was too big and nobody understood what it meant. That blew my mind. So now I try to write simpler, but I still find myself using words, and my editor comes back and she says, what's a knowledge transfer? I'm like, really? You don't know what a knowledge transfer is? But it's kind of, I think it's like where you live in the United States. Like, the East Coast has different words, the West Coast has different words. So for me, I write it and she dumbs it down, my editor.
Okay, well, you say that they told you to write at an 8th grade level, and yet you've got teenagers reading your books. That's kind of a conundrum there. But do you find that more men than women or more women than men are reading your books?
I'm finding at this point more men, and I think that's because, and I'm finding it's more East Coast men and a couple of Alaska men. I have a couple of Alaska followers that constantly read anything new I put out, they contact me. But I'm finding that maybe because I used to make up town names and different locations. I used to make them up. Now I don't care. I basically will put a real town name in my book, and I think that's drawing readers in, and they're saying, oh, have you been there? I go, no, I do a lot of research, though. I try to make it as real as perfectly possible, and if I cannot find information that pulls in the readers, I kind of ask around.
Well, that leads me to, if you use real towns, are your characters straight from your imagination, or do you model them after people you know?
Straight from my imagination, and I get that so much. I actually have a friend that I correct him all the time. He goes, you write from life experience. I go, no, I don't, and don't get me in trouble. It's like, my husband's sitting right over there. Stop getting me in trouble. I've gone to shows where people are like, so how do I find Pedro? You don't find Pedro. Pedro's imaginary. No, I bet you he's real. No, he's fiction. I get that a lot. I guess I make them so realistic that people are like, oh, she must have dated a guy like that once. And then I've actually had people think I went to law school because I write about lawyers. I've had people think I was a coffee bean farmer. Oh, a veterinarian. That's the really good one. Oh, a model and a singer. No, I've never had any of those jobs.
Well, if you write in that much description, what type of research is required to come up with a convincing lawyer or coffee bean farmer?
Bing and Google are my biggest friends. I can tell you so much about the coffee bean industry, especially down in Costa Rica. I can tell you all about the earthquake that happened in New Zealand, what happened to the wineries there, what type of wine is grown, where all the people, this is horrible, but where all the people go in Australia to commit suicide, because those are all elements of one of my series, the Jaded series. And people from New Zealand have read my book and they're like, you've been here. No, I haven't, but I'm coming. I'll be there in 2017. But it's funny because they'll be like, how did you know? Like, how did you know about the train tracks? How did you know about this? I'm like, the internet. The internet is amazing. And if you don't know something, but you want to add it to your book and you want to make it believable, you have to research it. And I know a lot of people who write books don't do that. And when I read a book about a certain location, I'm like, high-rise buildings. I'm like, that's a farm town. Yeah, okay, yeah, they have like a main street, but there's no high-rises. It kind of blows my mind. And I don't want to make a reader angry, where if I write about their hometown in New Zealand, and if I have my facts wrong, please, they better correct me. Because if you don't, I'm going to just be stuck ignorance, and I just would rather have them say, you know what, you're wrong. Okay, I'm sorry. In my next book, I'll definitely dedicate it to you. But that's the way I do it.
I like the idea of Tom and Cassie bonding over his young daughter. How did you come up with that storyline?
My first couple books were more couple-based. And then I wrote a fourth book called Must Wait, and that was about a single father coffee bean farmer in Costa Rica whose wife died during childbirth. And it was traumatic. I think it would be traumatic for any young father. And the women readers loved that story so much, and they loved some of the characters and they hated some of the characters. So did I when I was writing the book. So when Stalemate, again, was another dream, and I woke up and I'm like, oh, that's good. And I know a lot of single fathers now, like the times are changing. A lot more fathers are getting custody of their children than the wives are. So you're seeing like a change, and you're seeing how they interact with their children, and it's not like what we've seen like the 50s through the 70s. I think now things are changing. So that's kind of how I came up with it. It's more modern day, and I wanted to bring that element in because you have people who are in their mid to late 20s, and they're saying, okay, you know, it's time maybe I start getting serious about my relationship. But you already have people who've had families, and kind of like the melting pot, there's the family melting pot.
Will we see Tom and Cassie again in a sequel or a series?
I've been told yes. When I wrote that book, I said, oh, good, a standalone, I'm done. But everybody who contacts me about that book and who comes to the book shows, they tell me over and over again, their story is not over. There's more. So I said maybe in the future, but then I've been getting pressure. There's another character in that book where people want a spin-off novel. So they were like, really kind of, they're pushing, but I have 5 more books coming out. So until I get all of that dumped out of my head and released, I can't think about them.
If you could compare Stalemate with any other, what would that other book be?
I haven't read one yet that's kind of like mine. It's kind of unique in its own way. You have a bad boy who you learn why he's a bad boy and why he acts the way he does, and kind of, what did one of my readers say, it kind of threw him through a loop because he didn't see it coming and why he is the way he is, and it kind of made me feel good. I'm like, oh, I got you on the edge, didn't I? But I haven't read anything like it yet. There's one person who's kind of in the same writing style as me. Her name is Abby Glennis, and I don't think she's wrote a single parent story yet, at least not that I'm aware of.
What kind of feedback have you received from readers of Stalemate?
They, some of the words I can't say, even though my husband has the one made-up word being printed on shirts. It's bad. But I hear a lot of steamy of a couple Canadians. They just lay it out there. They actually told me things that I didn't need to know. But I mean, I was like, at first I was like shocked, and then my assistant was like, that's cool. I'm like, my husband's like, well, what do you expect? You're writing a kind of erotic romance story and people telling you about their sex lives. That's bothering you? You're basically writing about fictional characters, but real people telling you? Really? You're upset? But I get people that tell me they love it and they can't wait to read the rest of my books. Like I said before, I get people basically asking, where can I meet this guy? And it's like, he doesn't exist. But it's funny, some of the things that people come up with. There was one show where I actually wished I had a camcorder set up behind me. I had readers come through, and there was two of them standing at my table debating the book and the characters in the book like they were real. And I mean, it makes me laugh. It makes me feel good. But and they're like, where they're going to go next, and and I'm like, wow. And well, I think Kathy should have did this, and I'm like, that's a good idea too. It makes me laugh, and I take mental notes. And as soon as I get to my phone or an iPad, I sit there and I'm like, I kind of like that concept. And sometimes when people talk and they're hashing out the characters, I'm like, that works for like the book I'm writing. I'm like, oh, that's a good plot twist. And I tell people, I'm like, if that shows up in my next book, don't be upset. And they're like, oh, I love that. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you credit. But it's funny, and it's actually kind of boosting.
What is the ultimate message in Stalemate that you want your readers to remember?
Give love a chance. That's the ultimate message. Give love a chance, whether they're a single parent, or whether the girl has a dark history, whether you have the dark history. Just be upfront and honest and see how it works out. I mean, what's that term the kids are using? YOLO, you only live once. Well, I kind of believe that's true. You might as well give everything a go. Everything's a learning experience, and you just can't knock down. If you're interested in someone, pursue it, because you don't know how it's going to pan out.
So where can we learn more about you, about your other books, and most of all, where can we purchase Stalemate?
Well, I have a website. It's gingersharp.us, and you can find me on Facebook. I have a Twitter account, gingersharp12, and my Facebook account is facebook.com/gingersharpauthor. There's a lot of information up there about me and the events that I'm going to be at, and my books. You can find them at Amazon.com, local book shows, and Barnes & Nobles, and I think Smashwords and Shelfari also have the books. Oh, and Goodreads.
In the minute or so we have left, please share with our listeners something about Stalemate that will be an incentive for them to buy it and read it.
I find it to be realistic. Some people don't, but there's a lot of young people who are going through things that you would never imagine in your life, and what things that they will do for money to support their families. And when I did a little bit more investigative research, I was kind of shocked what kids will do, and well, I keep saying kids, young adults, people 23, 24, 25, who kind of find themselves in jams, and I'm not talking about like drugs, because there is a drug element in the book, but it's quickly resolved. But more so to make sure that their families have better lives. And we see it with some of these kids that come in from foreign countries, and they're working 3 jobs to try to get their parents to the United States and help them and have better lives. So it's not only the illegal things or the naughty things, but it's the honorable things. And that's really what my book's about, all the things people do to better their lives. Some of it could be wrong, some of it could be positive.
Ginger, it's been fun talking with you today. I enjoy reading your chosen genre, and I'm eager to read Stalemate. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us, and I'd like to invite you to come back again when you release your next book.
Sure, thank you.
Ginger Sharp's book is a realistic look at rough relationships and the physical maintains and emotional hurdles people have to climb before they accept the inevitable and to give in to their passions. Many of us have been in rough relationships, and Ginger's book may offer a different perspective of a relationship challenge. Please visit theauthorshow.com.